John, we're joined by one of our favorites. We see at the stadium all the time. That's Harrison Bader.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Harrison is a great guest, and he's agreed to rejoin us. This is his second time. He's the second player, along with Tommy Pham, who's willing to come back even after our first interview. And he's a terrific thinker, a terrific speaker. I think he has a future in broadcast. A lot of years to play, though, at age 30, I do believe, and really looking forward to talking to Harrison again.
See, they don't all hate us, John. We'll talk to Harrison, who was a Yankee last year, a Met this year, and just faced the Dodgers in the NLCS about all of that. John and I will break down the World Series to date. We'll play hit and error at the end if you stick with us on the show with Joel, Sherman, and Jon Heyman. John, it's hard to do one of these shows during the middle of a World Series, though it doesn't really feel like we're in the middle. We feels like we're near the end. We're recording this the morning after the Yankees lost their first home World Series game in 15 years. They're down 3 games to none. I guess Big Poppy and Kevin Millar and Johnny Damon could walk through that door. But if they don't, the Yankee season is over. And it always feels worse. We both covered those great Braves teams that won what 14 or 15 straight NL East titles and only won
Yeah.
championships, and they're known as losers. Those Buffalo Bills who went to the Super Bowl 4 years in a row, they're known as losers. You get more scrutiny when you get to this time of year and you don't perform well. But the Yankees have not performed well. The Dodgers are better than them in all the things the Yankees do well, and there's so much the Yankees don't do well, and the Dodgers are good at that also, John. And I think that's why they're up 3 games to none.
Yeah, I mean, my thought right now is that the National League was just much better than the American League. I mean, the Mets put up a better fight. The Padres certainly put up a much better fight and probably should have won. On paper right now, I think even some Dodger people would admit the Padres seem like a better team. Of course, the Dodgers are missing five very good, two all-time great starters. I mean, Clayton Kershaw at this moment isn't what he was, but he was pretty good this year if you look at what his record was, and certainly Glass now and Gonsolin and May. I mean, they are missing some terrific pieces, and that's why I thought the Yankees had a good chance to win this World Series. And I just feel like right now, the Dodgers are certainly better. The Mets, they were 4-0 against the Yankees, right? The Mets may be a better team. Who knows? Maybe the Phillies are. The American League was just inferior at this moment. That's what I feel. We could talk about the free ride, how the Yankees always beat the AL Central. I'll give them a little more credit than that, but it does feel like to me the Dodgers, even this team, even though they've only won by 2 runs twice and 3 runs once, double them up in all 3 games, it does feel like they are much better, and they're much better without five very good to great starters.
John, when I look at this, you're nicer than me for sure because I don't forgive the AL Central thing, which is since 2017 they're 7-0 in rounds against the AL Central, and aside from Oakland, a wild card game, they've lost to everybody else who's either Houston or an AL East team, and they're on the brink of losing to the Dodgers. It's not just the National League this year. There's a class that the Yankees still haven't broken through in this situation. And so, but I harken back. I covered an NFL playoff game in January of '87. It was the Giants and the 49ers at the Meadowlands. And on the 49ers, I believe it was the opening drive, Jerry Rice was running for a touchdown and inexplicably dropped the ball. It got like kicked through the end zone. And I think the Giants went on to win 49-3. And someone was asked afterwards, well, what if he would have run in for a touchdown? And someone said, well, then they would have lost 49-7. Uh, and I just wonder, do we feel that way about game one? If Nestor Cortez gets an out, or
Yeah.
Tim Hill is brought in, or by the way, the Yankees don't play brutally defensively, technically terrible, as we've been talking about, certainly I've been talking about all year, and they win game one. Is this a World Series or they just lose 4 games to 1?
No, I don't believe I give them more credit than that. I don't think you fall apart over one home run. Obviously it was a grand slam, it was historic, it was extra innings. And we talked about Cortez over Hill. we talk about it like Hill is like Hader or Tanner Scott or something. I mean, let's not go crazy with this. Nestor Cortez looked pretty good yesterday, so I'm not going to blame Boone. I don't think it's Boone's fault. I mean, I do think the Dodgers are a better team, and it shows over,
John, can
these
I ask one
important
question?
games.
Can I
You
ask
know,
it's a theory question. Actually think the world of Nestor Cortez is a competitor, and
yes,
I'm
I
not
do too.
afraid.
Yes, I
And
agree.
I'm not afraid to bring him into a big spot. But for a guy who hasn't pitched in 37 days,
Right.
that's the best top of the lineup in the sport, one of the best ever. Is that the water you actually want to throw somebody in? And I agree, like Tim Hill isn't about to make us all
Right.
forget that Tug McGraw ever pitched in the game or
No.
anything like that. But he has been successful in pitching well recently. And my question was just about in what pregame meeting, this is a team that has meetings about meetings. Did anyone say, you know what I think is a good idea? If this lane comes up in the biggest spot of all in his first
Right.
outing, let's just throw him in the water. That's my problem with it. It's not the Nestor Cortez of it all.
Yeah, I
It's
mean, it's a
the
gamble.
it's
It's a gamble. I mean, clearly he took a risk. I mean, everybody can play by the book all the time, but the managers who get the most praise are the ones who go with their gut every once in a while. He loves Cortez. He believes, like you and I do, that he is a guy with a lot of courage. They did have reports. I know he wasn't throwing in games for 37 days, a long time. And I was critical, and everybody was critical of that move at that time. But we saw Cortez pitch last night, and he looks pretty good. I don't know that the difference between Hill and Cortez is that great. Obviously, Cortez's pitch wasn't exactly where he wanted. It was 93-mile-an-hour fastball. He's not a guy who throws 99, neither is Hill, but I don't. I mean, we're. It's easier to play this, do the safe thing and the obvious thing, which is to bring in the guy who'd been in the postseason, given up only one run in 5 2/3 in Hill, and had been good in the regular season. But I don't. I'm not going to kill him for that. I don't think that was an obvious error. Yeah. Wouldn't I? Do I think he probably should have gone with Hill? Probably, and certainly in retrospect. But I don't think it's worth killing him over. I don't think that's the reason the Yankees aren't hitting. I mean, it you know the Yankees should have had the big advantage in the rotation. But I mean, obviously Yamamoto has pitched his best game since coming back from a shoulder injury. Shoulder, that's a serious thing, right? Bueller pitched his best game. He certainly has looked better lately, but he pitched his best game. And I mean, the Yankees just they can't hit. And if you can't
well,
hit I mean, when you get on base, you're terrible at base running, and your defense is certainly not nearly as good as the Dodgers defense. You're in trouble, and they are in trouble. And I don't see Ortiz walking through the door, and I think it's very unlikely that they come back and make a series of this.
yeah, I would think that they're in a very near impossible situation. John, they've played 12 playoff games. All of them have been decided by 3 runs or fewer, including the 9 they played against the AL Central. There was a truth, though, about those AL Central. Like I think about game 1 for the Yankees. In the key spot, they retire Otani, Cortez, and they walk Betts, but they're still Freeman. And so, like Kansas City, you retire Witt, there's
Right.
no other way to get hurt. If you retire Jose Ramirez against Cleveland in this series, if you do that. Now, with all of that said, the starting pitching not pitching well, the technical stuff they do poorly on both sides of the ball. If Aaron Judge is hitting, they win at least one of these games. You could argue 2 of these games. You might argue they might have won all 3 of these games if Aaron Judge had a hot 3 days, which we have seen a lot of. But the problem for Aaron Judge's legacy to me, John, is this isn't 3 days. It's 12 games again this postseason. He had a big hit against Emmanuel Clase, hasn't really shown up in the other 11. And now it's 6 or 7 postseasons of this. He's under 200 as a hitter. He's striking out at like 35%. This is an interesting legacy now. He's going to be a 2-time AL MVP winner. And that is not going to shimmer quite the way we thought it was a few weeks ago, because these are the Yankees, for better or worse. They tell us all the time, judge us by championships. It's championships or bust. So you must perform at this time. The guy who threw out the first pitch yesterday was Derek Jeter. We remember Derek Jeter for the postseason. And Aaron Judge, we're going to remember for the postseason unless something changes also, but for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a legacy Yankee or an all-time great Yankee, yeah, he's going to be behind unless something changes. I mean, he's got years to go, but I mean, at this stage, he'll be behind Jeter, behind Rivera, and behind other guys who weren't as good as him over the seasons, right? Over the regular seasons. That's fair. I would say that. I still think he is an all-time great player and, an amazing hitter. And, it's certainly something mental going on, right? I mean, it cannot be physical. He does not appear to be injured in any way, and it's certainly he's facing better pitching. I don't get those guys like Jeter and certainly Kike Hernandez and Giancarlo Stanton who actually perform better at this time when the weather isn't as good and the pitchers are much better. And Kansas City and Cleveland, let's be fair, do have pretty good pitching, so they kept those games close. I get some drop off, but it is something that he's now under 200, batting under 200, a guy with
In
this
more than a
power.
third of a regular, like he's up over, it's like
Yeah,
55, 56 games now. That's more than a third of a regular season. This is not
yeah. He
a,
is streaky though. He is streaky.
yes,
Maybe he hit the bad streaks at the wrong time. Maybe it's just that. I mean, you talk to scouts who say he's swinging uphill. He's just a mistake hitter at this point, and there aren't many mistakes made by these type of pitchers at this time. So, but I do think over this stretch, I would agree there's something mental going on here. And same with Stanton and Soto, they locked in October and actually performing somewhat or at least slightly better than they did in the regular season.
John, look, the Dodgers aren't going to just be handed this. The Yankees are probably going to show up in the Bronx tonight. They'll try
Yeah.
to win a game or two, force this back to Los Angeles. But where we are again, which is beat AL Central teams, but when the opponent rises, the Yankees don't. I'm just wondering, we talk about it a lot, you and I, we watch it a lot, that there's just a lot of bad baseball being played. And then you kind of see when it's done well, like Tommy Edman is a hell of a baseball player. Like the read on the pop-up that Betts hits to score the run, like I just haven't seen that from the Yankees in 5 years. That kind of read.
He just
Like,
started running. It was
like,
amazing.
and that kind of read and creating an extra 90 feet and all that. Do you think for a team that is playing in the World Series, you don't want to say you got to go back to the drawing board, but do you think the Yankees are missing an element of understanding that it just can't all be power, miss the bat pitching and power bats? And that there has to be, when your power bats are gone, there has to be another way to score runs and play the game well and save your pitchers' pitches by not doing stupid things on defense. I just wonder, John, I've harped on it so much and I respect you so much. Am I over harping and missing the point? Well, if you throw it hard and swing hard and you're good at it, you'll probably win a ton of games. Stop over complicating
Right.
this.
Yeah, I mean, it is possible to win the World Series this way. It's not that likely to just be a power pitching, power hitting, and do the little things poorly. And you've been pointing this out all year, how poor they are at base running and all the little things. And I mean, it was something to see Edman. And I mean, Soto gave it a good fake that he might catch it. And you know that
Edman had already scored by the time he was faking.
right.
He was rounding third base.
7 out of 9 Yankees probably would have been fooled by that.
Yeah.
Edman is just a terrific player. The Yankees did try for him. They felt they were boxed out the whole time for whatever reason. The White Sox were fixated or fixed. I don't want it to be negative, fixed on doing this 3-team trade and figuring out with the Cardinals for whatever reason. I don't know whether they just like Vargas so much or what. But I mean, Edman's a terrific player. The Dodgers have amazing depth. And I mean, once this is over and you look at these two teams, the Yankees, now Soto's a free agent, right? So you take away, arguably their best player. I mean, I guess Judge is probably their best player, but if you count the postseason, could make a case for Soto, but certainly one of the best players in the game. And look what the Dodgers have coming back. They'll have Ohtani as a pitcher. They'll have Kershaw back as a pitcher. They'll have Glasnow back. They'll have Gonsolin back. They'll have May back. I mean, what are they losing? Walker Buehler's a free agent. I mean, that's,
I think they might qualify him now, John.
they might. I know I think they were leaning against, and now they've thrown another game with no runs given up in the postseason. 20 million, they might.
I think that because of the stuff just as a way to wrap up this thing, it's a little bit based on your reporting, John, and also stuff I've heard, which is they saved so much money on Ohtani, in actual money, and made so much money on Ohtani that the idea of giving like a $21 million qualifying offer to somebody who maybe should only make 13 or 15 or whatever the number you think Bueller is, it's on a 1 year deal, is
Yep.
something that's so much easier for them, to the point where you wrote about, hey, they're going to at least have the conversation with Soto. This is what they did. They had the conversation with Harper. They did do Bauer. It kind of gets lost to time that they're willing, that there's not going to be a great player, especially prime age player, that the Dodgers aren't in for a long, long time now, because their model, both financial and structural, works so well toward doing it.
Right. I mean, there's basically been two star players, outside megastar type players, who they didn't go for. Carlos Correa, because he was an Astro, and the Dodger fans all hate Astros, and Aaron Judge, because they didn't think they could get him. On two other West Coast teams gave it a shot. Dodgers didn't think they had any chance. In this case, they feel like they might have a shot. I think they think that they're probably underdogs in the Soto Derby, but they will give it a try. And we don't know. I mean, Judge was homegrown. Soto is not. We do believe that Soto's enjoyed his time here. He particularly seems to love the roll call. But I mean, is the roll call going to
No,
win the day? I don't know.
a different kind of role is going to win the day, John.
Exactly. I mean, I think the Yankees believe he's going to take the best contract or the most money, however you want to put it. They believe that, and look, they weren't going to offer the most for Judge, but Judge wanted to stay. He had that lure to be a historic Yankee and right the wrong, and do great in the postseason, and continue to be set records as a Yankee. And I get it. I mean, Soto doesn't have that. He's waited now through three teams, and he's a free agent. And most free agents go for the contract. And there's no guarantee he's going to be a Yankee. I will say I do think they're the favorite, whatever that means at this point. That's just a guess. But I mean, look at that Dodger team with all that pitching coming back, that depth of that lineup. Tommy
They
Edman
might
was
end
the
up with
NLCS.
Sasaki. They might end up
Yeah,
with Sasaki
they can
also.
end up with anybody. Burns is from Southern California. Fried's from Southern California. Flaherty's from Southern. They're all from Southern California. They may get all of them. They don't care. They had really 10 viable starting pitchers this year. More than half of them are hurt at this point. But I mean, Tommy Edman, who we both come to love after watching him, at least I saw him in the NLCS too. I mean, he's batting ninth. He batted ninth.
Yeah.
I mean, the Yankees don't have I know Verdugo hit a home run, but their number 9 hitter is not Tommy Edman. They got hitters throughout that lineup. Will Smith, who at one time was the cleanup hitter, he's batted 8th, 7th, 6th, whatever. Kike Hernandez, very clutch. I mean, they're Muncy. I mean, got on base every time, it seemed like, in the NLCS. I mean, there's not an out in that lineup. Yankees got some outs in their lineup.
Yeah.
I don't want to say they have two hitters, but we'll give them 2.5, maybe 3. We're not going to repeat the funny Luis Severino line, but they're down to a few. And if it's Judge isn't hitting and you can't run the bases very well and your defense is only average, you're not going to win. You're not going to beat the Dodgers.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Luis Severino. He was a Yankee, then a Met. Our guest coming up, Harrison Bader, fills both of those buckets as well. If you stick with us on the show with Joel, Sherman, and Jon Heyman, you'll hear Harrison Bader next. John and I are so happy to be joined by someone who makes our job so easy during the actual season, the regular season, and the postseason this year, and that's Harrison Bader of the Mets. And Harrison was such an obvious person to reach out to. Just played in the NLCS, so you played against the Dodgers. You played with the Yankees last year. It's why the network, MLB Network, is grabbing you to car wash you on Wednesday, get you on a lot of shows. Let's deal with the Mets first a little bit. I just wonder, beyond the obvious, it's a talented team. Is there a moment, a reason why that the club soared, really reaching probably as high a peak as we could have imagined and getting all the way to the NLCS? Why did that happen?
Well, yeah, I think you mentioned it best, with the team reaching a peak. And then I think we, kind of working backwards from there, how do you create, a locker room full of guys who are trying to get the absolute most out of their talent, out of their roster. I think it was an obvious, attempt of David Stearns to throw together a team of just baseball players, of guys who could contribute as if everybody was a piece of a larger puzzle. And I think there was really nobody in that locker room that felt like they needed to overdo or outreach their own talents or ability, and simply be themselves. And I think, when you have a group full of guys who back each other up, communicate with each other about, what their role is, what their capabilities are, and how they contribute to a team, I think you build a lot of really positive energy in the clubhouse, and confidence from there stems in a really positive way. And before you find yourself rolling and playing really good branded baseball. And I think that just feeds into the confidence even more. So, I think the biggest recipe there was just, playing for playing for the team, playing for things bigger than yourself. And I think, 1 through 26 or whatever the roster is these days, I just think everybody just did that really, really well and executed very well. And I think we squeezed as much juice, if you will, out of the orange. And, I think we had a very good run. So yeah, it was a fantastic season.
Yeah, and you know what? You guys won 2 games against the Dodgers. You certainly gave them a fight, and the Padres probably should have won that series. So I know you not being involved in this, I know you'll be at the stadium today, but you're not going to want to stay to watch rather than play in the game. But what is your observation? I know even if you haven't been watching all the games that your Mets team hasn't been involved in, I got the feeling that National League is just better than the American League this year. That's just my impression at this point. Do you think that theory could be true?
I think part of our success all year was really staying in our dugout, staying in our locker room. We really, with the exception of when we were preparing for a team or going into a city to play a team, that was really the only time we were ever watching other baseball and talking about other baseball. And I think to speak on that, at least from my perspective, the focus always remained in our dugout and in our locker room. And haven't really watched much baseball now. Don't really know what else is going on outside of the Mets organization. So I really don't know. All I know is that the Dodgers are a fantastic team. We have tremendous respect for them, and our game planning going into that series, was pretty extensive because of how depthy their roster of pitchers were, and obviously on the pitching side, not my department, but I guess what I'm getting at is I don't know. I thought we played a really good brand of baseball, and I know we'd be in a really good position if we were still playing. So I just think I think once you get to this level, the teams are so good, everybody's so good that really the difference makers are, the little things. So with regards to that, I think that's just, showing right now. But again, I don't really know. I really don't. I think, focusing on ourselves was what got us that far. And outside of that, I really can't speak on it, John.
Harrison, you mentioned a bunch of times, like attention to detail, that you guys were really good at it. You played on this team, you played on the Yankees. Were the Yankees as good at attention to detail in your time there as the Mets are right now? Because from a distance, it seemed to me the Mets were a lot more buttoned up than this version of the Yankees.
Yeah, I think both teams did a really good job of paying attention to detail. I've always stood behind the notion of pitching and defense wins championships. Depth in your pitching staff, and then obviously on defense. And I think both teams, when we compare the Mets and the Yankees, I think both teams do a very good job of that. And listen, you don't get this far in a season, and you don't get this deep into October without being very, very good at that. And I just think that the difference maker this far down the stretch are the slightest of details, and we're really splitting hairs here. And the guys are so good, everybody's so focused during these times that, the game is really decided by one pitch. Or one instance on defense or on the mound at times, or one swing. And when you're throwing 250 pitches on each side during a 9-inning baseball game, when you kind of boil it down to one pitch, that's how fine these details are. And I really do think that these games can go either way. And it just so happens that it's gone the Dodgers' way this far. But, by no means is this series over. I know a lot of those guys in that locker room. I know they're going to go out there and put their best foot forward, as are the Dodgers. So, just as a fan now, being a part of it, checking in, admittedly, here and there. I just love good quality baseball that I think both teams are playing.
I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. You and Pete are very close friends, played together for the Florida Gators, now playing together again with the Mets. You seem very tight with Pete. So obviously he's a free agent. The fans love him. He had a huge postseason. Certainly the fans want to keep him around. I kind of feel like the owner, Steve Cohen, would like to keep him around. He has said only good things about the Mets and New York, even though he is a Floridian, unlike yourself, who is a New Yorker. How strong do you think his ties are to the Mets, or do you think that there's a good possibility he's going to end up somewhere else?
Yeah, Pete, Pete's done a lot of fantastic work in New York City. Being a native New Yorker, as you guys are as well, I think, or at least doing a lot of work here for a long period of time. I think you guys can also speak to that. And I think there's something special, whether it's New York, whether it's any type of player who's lasted this long within an organization. In many ways, I thought I was going to remain a Cardinal for my entire career, and things obviously went differently, which is fine. But to be at this point in his career, he's earned a decision to make a decision. And I do think that he certainly has a home with a lot of fans, and just based on the work he's done in New York. But if his decision is to go elsewhere, then that's his. I just hope that at the end of the day, he's happy, because like you mentioned, he's a very close friend of mine. I've seen him work tremendously hard since the moment he stepped on the University of Florida's campus, on all aspects of his game. And that should be rewarded. And I think the game has finally allowed him to be in a position where he can, in fact, make a decision, which is, in many ways a blessing, if you will, in itself. So wherever he ends up, I know it'll be the right decision for him. He has a fantastic family, a fantastic and beautiful wife, and they'll think very hard on it. And wherever he lands, whatever city gets to, be around him, and his work off the field as well, which should never go unmentioned. They're getting just an absolute A+ of a human being. So I'm excited to see how it shakes out. And I know wherever he ends up will be his home for years to come. So I'm excited for him.
We are both New Yorkers, Harrison, just to check that box. But there's nothing
I
quite.
was 99% sure.
But
I was 99% sure.
But there's nothing.
I will say native is a little strong, because I was born in Santa Fe, New Mexico. But
Okay.
I am a New Yorker. That's fair.
Yes.
Yeah.
You guys are New Yorkers. Absolutely.
But I was going to point out there's nothing quite as New York as hearing the siren go by your apartment earlier at the end of the year.
Or at 8:05 in the morning. You know what I'm saying? It's all good.
Harrison, you also had a kind of unique situation. You played for the Yankees when Carlos Mendoza was a coach, and now you've seen him as a manager. How do you think he handles his first year? What do you think his trajectory is as a major league manager?
I think just being around a number of managers in my career to this point, I think a lot of them, the one thing that they have in common is their, the way they handle their players. I think it's their job to manage the locker room. Obviously, with the game introducing so many analytics very quickly, I think managers are now tasked with kind of being a much larger bridge between the front office and the clubhouse, and having to make both parties, if you will, happy. And many times that involves decisions where the players aren't always necessarily happy, but it's their job to remind them that, what we got going on here is much bigger than any individual. And, that really boils down to communication. And I think from day one, he's preached communication. I think it's really important as a first-year manager to communicate extremely well. And listen, at the end of the day, he had a locker room full of guys who were free agents prior to coming to the Mets. He had a locker room full of guys who had a lot of experience in this game and have seen and been around different types of players and managers. And it was a large undertaking. And I think, considering how it all went down, looking back on it now, I think he did a great job. I hope he has a very long career as a manager. I hope he continues to manage the Mets, because I think he really is in many ways perfect for that job. And yeah, listen, I think he just, at the end of the day as well, I think he had a lot of fun. And I think if he continues to, in his own way as a manager, have fun and also communicate with his players, I think he'll be in a great position. And I really wish the best for him, because he's a wonderful family. His kids were always around shagging fly balls, which is always fun to see. And I think there's just a really good synergy in New York right now. And I think, not that it necessarily matters to the players, but I think, we knew how good we were, but I think we surprised a lot of people, which I think is very important. And, I think the foundation is set in New York for continued success. Obviously, they have a fantastic manager in the Cohen family and Steve. So listen, I'm excited for everything to come in New York. And again, as a native New Yorker, I'm just excited for the city because Carlos led a fantastic group of guys there. So yeah, listen, we had fun, and yeah, I just wish him the best. I really do.
I want to ask about you now. I mean, you've proven a lot of people wrong over starting when as a youth. Like me, you grew up in a leafy suburb of New York. I was told immediately, and he was correct by my little league coach, that don't ever think you'll ever get to the major leagues. None of you guys are going to ever be major leaguers, and he was correct. Although one of them, Tony Ressler, now owns is a part owner of the Brewers and owns the Atlanta Hawks. But you proved a lot of people wrong. You are not a big fellow, and certainly became a third-round draft choice. Been a major leaguer for, I don't know, about 7 years at this point, or a free agent again. And you've played for 4 teams. Count the Reds briefly. Where do things stand with you right now as a free agent? What are your hopes and aspirations for the winter?
Yeah, my hopes and aspirations are the same as they were since I was 5 years old, and that's just continuing to play the game I love. Um, there's nothing more satisfying than getting ready and suiting up to go out there and play baseball. It's what I love to do. It's what my family has supported me since day one. And yeah, it never stops. I think coming off of a major injury, we've seen a lot of guys coming out now. Unfortunately, you have to have the same injury repaired, which is that like hernia. I think considering how extensive it was and how short my offseason was, I think that, the Mets giving me an opportunity to go out there and continue to showcase myself, showcase my game, and just be on a winning team. I thought it was a great year. Listen, the season's always going to present you with challenges. Towards the end there, you just kind of run out of steam. But, again, this entire game, whether it's in an entire offseason or whether it's within a single day in season, it's all about preparation. It's all about the work behind the scenes. I have a fantastic group with me that will get me for an entire offseason as I, approach my travel to Tampa, where I train full time. So listen, I'm excited. I think that there are a lot of teams that are definitely in use of a center fielder. And I'm excited to just go out there and continue to showcase myself. This has always been, this has never been about what jersey I wear. It's never been about, what organization you play for. It's always been about the game, and it's the brand of baseball, and it's about winning. And those things so far outweigh any individual and anything there. So I'm excited. I look forward again to the next opportunity. Like we mentioned earlier, I'm not sure how long I'll be staying to watch the game because I can't bear being in a stadium when I have a uniform on. I feel strange if I'm wearing baggy clothing and a leather jacket. So listen, I'm just excited to start the work, but there's certainly so much more in the tank. I think this just going through years of experience. I think every year just gets more fun, more challenging, and that's what it's all about. Because as we know, this game has a shelf life, and I'm certainly gonna burn it down until the wheels fall off. So listen, I'm excited. I really am.
Yeah, you played 143 games this year, Harrison. That's career high. You're still only 30. I do wonder, how involved are you in your free agency? Do you let a agent do it all and hand you some stuff when he thinks it's time? Are you someone who wants to know on a daily basis what's going on? Do you want to talk to the teams that are interested in you? How do you go through this process?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's an interesting process, and I've actually had an opportunity to talk to a number of guys. Some guys who go 6 years or they go 5 years and they kind of get locked up and they never really have to deal with it. And others have a different story. And I think everybody has a different route in this game. But what's most important, I think, is information and knowledge. And with regards to that, I do my best to always remain informed. I certainly want to control my own narrative to the best of my ability. I want to know what teams are thinking of me, what teams think my value is, and that looks different, from organization to organization. And just because one organization chooses not to play you in a certain instance does not mean that another organization doesn't view you a different way. And I think it's very important to, again, control your narrative. If there are questions of because everything's documented with regards to medicals and whatnot. So always just clarifying, always being readily available to come in to do some type of force testing, to test a tendon or a ligament, whatever it is. Always just remaining ready and willing to prove that you absolutely have value. Because my story at this point in my career is not someone who's gone 6 years clear cut. Now I'm, dealing with, a large 10-year deal where we're working out hundreds of millions of dollars. My story is different, which is fine. So I think, again, it's just really important to surround yourself with good agents who know you, who know your personality, and always being able to back up what they say for you. I think is really important, because, again, once spring training starts, we're off. So you better be ready for whatever comes. So I definitely like to know as much as possible, and use the information to make an informed decision from there.
You triggered something with me just now by saying, just because you weren't playing with one organization, you did play the bulk of the games as the starting center fielder. But I'm just wondering, you were so great in the playoffs with the Yankees. I mean, you were their best player during that playoff run a couple of years back, hitting all those home runs against the Guardians. What did you think? I mean, obviously Tyrone Taylor seemed to be a little hotter in terms of the offense at that moment. And I know I remarked to you, I watched one of your batting practices and it was fantastic, and you weren't playing that day and you were very nice about it. What are your thoughts, as you weren't really, you started a few games, but you were, when it got to the playoffs, you were basically the backup. What were your thoughts going through that at that point, and how'd you deal with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, it's really important to always respect the guy who's making the lineup, or, however the lineup was being formed, just having respect for that. And I think, like you mentioned, there were other players that were obviously playing in front of me, which is fine. And I think what that really came down to was the manager and Mendoza's level of confidence in me. And I think down the stretch that I just ran out of steam, and I wasn't giving him confidence to play me. And I think that this kind of goes back to something that has always stuck with me as a freshman at the University of Florida, where my coach, Brad White, would always say that the players think that the coaches make the lineup. But at the end of the day, the players really make the lineup. The players make the lineup based on how they work, their performance on the field, and all those things go into, the next game that comes up and who we're going to play. And I think with regards to that, I wasn't given the confidence to play, which is fine. I think that there are many times, and it's a good lesson to learn, that sometimes you just have to curb your ego. You really do. This game is very humbling. If it doesn't humble you in a season, it'll humble you in a day. And if it doesn't do that, at some point you will be humbled. There's no doubt about it. And I think it was just simply my time where I was humbled. And again, this goes back to having a role that's so much bigger than myself. It was so important, regardless of my playing time, to be on the same path, which was to be ready at all times in case something happened. And my role coming into that was to be, spot starts and playing defense. And if somebody needed to run, or if there was an at bat, whatever it was, but that was simply my role. And, when you get down the stretch and you do so much to get to the postseason, it's so much bigger than any individual. So my ego did not matter by any means. I was always ready for the team. I was always ready to be called upon. And I think it's important because I always want to be on the field, especially if there's a big league game in October going on. And I think moving down the stretch, I'll definitely use that as fuel to remind myself that as good of a first half as you might have, as good of a 4 months or 5 months you might have, this is a 6-month season. And, you have to continue to push the tempo and do more, to where if you get into that position to be in October baseball, you have to give your manager and show your manager, reason to play you. And I just simply didn't. So it's all good. I enjoyed obviously every second of that locker room, whether I was on the field or not, for 9 innings or 1 inning, whatever it was. We had such a good energy going, and I was just extremely happy to be a part of it. And it was a fun ride regardless. So I had an absolute blast. I really did.
Harrison, as a way to wrap up, I wonder, you used the word earlier about the Mets, that they have a good foundation. I do think they're at an interesting moment, because it does feel like they took a step. On the other hand, like yourself, a lot of key players are free agents. John mentioned Pete in a question earlier. I think your 3 most durable starters, Quintana, Minaya, Severino during the season are free agents. Key bullpen guys, Jose Iglesias, who meant so much to the team, it seemed, on and off the field, is a free agent. When you use the word foundation, do you see it withstanding that they're going to have at least as good an offseason as they had last year, this offseason, to keep the good times you've been talking about rolling?
Yeah, listen, that's a great question. I think, listen, I think we made we made the playoffs by one game. There were so many different levels of contribution, whether it was on the side of pitching or whether it was on the side of offense, that contributed to that playoff run. And I think when you kind of boil it down, replacing those guys is obviously what the front office is going to be tasked with. So, was it a Pete home run that decided that one win? Was it a Jose Iglesias diving stop up the middle that decided it? Was it a Sean Manaea or a Severino gem of a game that got us over that hump? Whatever it is, that there's going to be wins to be made up by quality players. And all I know is that David Stearns came over in 1 year and put together a fantastic group of guys based on really quality research as far as I'm concerned. And, there's nothing that's going to say he's not going to be able to do it again. And again, I think Steve Cohen is extremely ambitious in his desire and his fire to continue to win games and put together and build playoff rosters. And you have obviously Carlos Mendoza, who, proved he can manage a group of guys in the clubhouse who, are a part of the same thing. So, when you throw all those things into a pod going into an off season, I think they absolutely have the ability to do fantastic things. And there's no doubt that, that step was taken forward and a new standard was set, if you will. So, listen, there's a lot of money coming off the books, as we know, for the Mets organization. I don't really dive into that part of the game, but, these are all things that we just really know on the surface. So I think they're obviously going to put together a fantastic team. And obviously not to mention the guys who are staying, because we only talked about the guys who are leaving. The guys who are staying are, Francisco Lindor, who's up there with the most fantastic teammates I've ever played with and been around. We're talking Paul Goldschmidt. We're talking Aaron Judge. We're talking Albert Pujols. Guys who, when they walk into a room, are just infectious with their knowledge, infectious with their smile, infectious with their energy. And then you obviously have Mark Vientos, who from day one, who when was sent down, I knew he'd be back. I don't know when it was going to be, but I knew he'd be back. Who's an absolute superstar on and off the field. And then you have, my favorite of them all, honestly, is, Francisco Alvarez, who's very reminiscent, in my opinion, of Yadier Molina, with all due respect. And obviously has a long way to go to be anywhere near Yadi, but Yadi just had this infectious charisma about him behind the plate in the years that I played with him. And, Francisco has the same. And I think when you have those guys who are there, who remain staples, in the organization, you really can't lose. So they're going to build around them, and they're going to be great. So I'm excited to again, just to see how it all shakes out.
Well, Harrison, John and I always appreciate talking to you, whether it's in this forum or at the ballpark. I know we'll see you a little later today before Game 4 out at Yankee Stadium. And we wish you nothing but the best in your offseason and with your free agency. You're always so kind with your time. All the best.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you,
John. Yes, of course. Thank you, guys. I really enjoyed it as always. Be well. See you guys soon.
John and I, of course, thank Harrison Bader for joining us on the show. John, hit or error? Probably for maybe for the last time of the 2024 season, hit or error?
Maybe. We'll see how things shake out here. But I'm going to go error, and I don't even know who it is. Whoever is coaching the Yankee base running, you probably know who it is. But you've been saying it all year, not a good base running team, and certainly proving out over the long haul as well. They've got 3 guys who are very, very slow at this point. Can't help that. And believe it or not, when I covered well, at least when I lived in Florida a little bit more, I used to see a lot of the Marlins, and Giancarlo Stanton was the 3rd fastest guy on the team. I used to watch them do wind sprints, and Jose Reyes was the 2nd fast. He was the 3rd fastest. And obviously he can't run like he used to. They're telling him not to go crazy. He probably did try his hardest, certainly in Game 3, didn't quite make it. But it's not just the ability to run; it's just the way that they do it on the base paths. Someone's got to figure something out.
Yeah, they've taken the fun out of fundamentals for sure. If you've watched them all
bad
year.
fundies, bad fundies,
yeah, bad fundies. Friend of the show, Keith Hernandez.
Right.
Yes. John, I'm going to give a hit to the Dodgers trade deadline.
Oh man, fantastic! Yep.
Flaherty and Kopech are guys who have had some questions about like temperament, like what they could handle. They've handled this all great. Kopech's been terrific out of the bullpen, giving them just a high-end arm who could be used anywhere. Obviously, he gave up a blast yesterday, but he's been very, very good for them. Flaherty's been excellent for him. But the guy who stands out to me is Harrison Bader's former Cardinal teammate, is Tommy Edman, who's just really a terrific baseball player, the kind of guy who helps you get through a season well by filling in a lot. He is a obviously dynamic hitter from the right side, a lot lesser from the left side, but I mean, just a lefty masher. You could put him so many places on the field. He's an expert base runner, and it feels like now, having seen these games, and you saw more, John. Obviously, you saw him win an NLCS MVP in person. You've really got to watch him because he just does a lot well over the course of 9 innings in 2 to 3 hours to help a team win a game.
Fantastic instinctual player. Made a great play in game one, I believe it was now. Just a terrific
A winning
player.
That play up the middle, that's the difference between 2-1 and 4-1 Yankees.
Absolutely.
The play he makes diving up the middle.
I mean, he's always thinking, and he batted right-handed against the right-hander Kane Lee with the changeup, as you pointed out to me in the press box. Again, and he's just a great thinker out there. And the Yankees tried to get him. They were boxed out for whatever reason. And Brian Cashman said Andrew Friedman does a fantastic job. And I think he did his best job, his best work this year with a team with at least 5 excellent starting pitchers injured, that they are on the cusp of another world championship. And Dave Roberts also has done an incredible job piecing it together with what I said was 2.5 starters. I'm not giving Walker Buehler credit. They had 3 starters, and they're all coming around now. And the bullpen usage, fantastic. We'll see a bullpen game today, and don't count them out. They won 2 out of 3 bullpen games in the National League Derby as well. So they do a great job. Edman, fantastic. Kopech, fantastic. Flaherty, fantastic. Just a great year all around for all the Dodger people.
Yeah, the Dodgers, in assembling this roster, to your point, we can't even say 1 to 26 because there's about another 10 on the injured list that they've gone ahead and been able to do something about, because they produce so many arms from their farm system. They do so well in the trade market. They do so well in free agency. And look, they're on the brink of a championship because of all of that. By the time we come back next week, John, we will know who the champion is. But before then, I have to do what I always do, which is thank our producer, Tommy Hogan, who really we appreciate. This is a tough time of year for John and I to kind of get a guest and find time that works for everyone. And it was a fire drill this morning, and Tommy always comes through and was able to pop on and do this. And John and I appreciate that so much, the work he does. Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to a podcast, rate and review us. The New York Post New York Post Sports YouTube page. Give us a view. And John, we're ending the regular season. It was great travel with you as usual. We'll be wrapping it up at some point next week if you stick with us on the show with Joel, Sherman, and Jon Heyman.